Hi, I'm Kevin from D-Tools with an introduction to the Project Creation Wizard.
The wizard has as many as 10 steps you can follow, but by default, only a client and project name are required. There is a feature called the New Project Required Fields that you can find under the Settings menu that allows you to identify specific settings that are required to actually create a project. Generally, the best practice is to add as much information as possible. Do the work now. Don't look for information later when you're ready to close the deal. So step 1 in the New Project Wizard, after you click Create and choose New, the wizard opens and you have many options here. Note the first and most important option is to set a client. You can click the drop down and pick an existing client from your list. You can also click the Create Client button and you have 4 options. New allows you to just type new information for a brand new client. From Outlook allows you to pull any clients that you have existing in your installed Outlook app. If you have the QuickBooks integration tied to System Integrator, you can also pull clients from QuickBooks, or you can create a client from an existing SI contact. Once you've made that decision, note that if you'd like to make any global changes to the client that you've chosen for this project, click the Edit Client button and make the changes there. Any other changes that you make further in the wizard will not get saved back to the parent client record. So you're going to add a project name. And in some cases, you might simply click Next and move on, or you could even click Save, in which case your project would get created and the project editor would open, and you'd be done with the project wizard here. But we'd like to talk about some additional settings. There are many. Some that you might set are the Assign To. Notice that by default, there's an Assign To value, and it's typically the user that you're signed in as into SI. If you are the sales rep, go ahead and pick yourself as the sales rep here in that sales rep field. If you're not, if you're putting this quote together for another sales rep, go ahead and pick their name instead. Later, you might pick resources like project manager or designer. These are typically not required at the quoting stage. You might add these later once your project's created. If you have some idea of when you expect to close this deal, go ahead and set the estimated close date. Once your project does close and you mark the project approved, SI will automatically set an actual close date for you. Again, if you know roughly when the project's going to start and have some idea of how long it might run for, go ahead and set your project start and end dates. If you have some idea of a budget, is this a $10,000 project or is this a $100,000 project? Go ahead and set a budget value. You may or may not be familiar with product price types. Just know that SI has up to 50 sets of pricing that can be enabled in your catalog. Not only can you assign them to a project so that that project inherits the price type, they can actually be assigned to clients, in which case they'll automatically be assigned to a project when you choose that client. Quantity-based. If you're not familiar with quantity-based, my recommendation is to start with a quantity-based project. If you'd like to learn more, check out our video on quantity-based versus unit-based projects. And if you're a US customer, you're likely not going to need the currency feature. In fact, it won't be enabled by default. But if you are a company that does work in multiple currencies, whether in the US or other regions, you're going to want to check out the currency feature. So go ahead and look for that on our support site at support.d-tools.com. Go ahead and search for currency and you'll find more information. And last, templates are a great way to capture kind of standard information or standard details that are important for projects. So go ahead and explore templates. If you'd like to use a project template when you're creating this project, click that button and you can choose a template. When you're done, you can go ahead and click Next, and we'll move on to step 2. Here in step 2, we're going to see some contacts for our client. Now, note that there are a couple of contacts already identified for the client I chose, and they're in a list here. Only one client can be the primary client. And notice there's the Set as Primary button, and that one of the clients has the designation primary next to their name. Why is this important? The primary contact would be the person that their name will show up on things like proposal reports, contract reports, anywhere there's a signature line. We're going to reference that primary contact by default. When you've entered your contacts or chosen them, go ahead and click Next. And in step 3, we're going to look at both site addresses and billing addresses. These were both inherited from my existing client record. Note that I have some options like cut, copy, and paste. So I can cut, copy, and paste address information between the site and billing addresses, as well as from other applications. I can click Map to see a map of this address, or I can get directions. If I click Change and I have other addresses associated with the client, I can pick a different address, and the Validate feature will actually look up this address and verify that it is in fact a valid United States postal address. When you're done here, go ahead and click Next, and we're on to step 4 for taxes. The default is that sales tax would be used, and it's the same for all taxable products and labor. You still get to choose individual tax rates for both the product section of your project as well as the labor section if you happen to have variable tax rates for those. Another option is that tax rates can basically be set for each product and labor in your project. And that means that every item within the project has both a product tax and a labor tax setting that you can apply unique rates. One more feature here is that an additional tax amount, effectively a flat tax amount, can be added on top of any tax that's auto-calculated based on your tax rates. And finally, there's a use tax feature. If you need use tax, you're going to click the button to enable it. And what use tax is it is a tax that is applied to the cost of the equipment you sell. And this tax rate is applied item by item, either in your catalog and or in your project. Note the setting to include use tax and margin markup calculations. Generally, this would be checked. If it's not checked, just be aware that if use tax is applied to the cost of your items, your margin calculations are pre-tax when they're calculated, and the result is that your margin is actually lower than it looks. You can click the Manage Taxes button to see a list of tax rates, to create new tax rates, to edit tax rates. If you'd like to look up your tax rates based on your project address, you can click this option, and you can see both your site and billing address. You can choose either of these as your tax lookup address. You can edit these addresses and also validate them that they're a valid address. When we're done here, go ahead and click Next, and we're on to step 5, which is resources. Note that the only resource I assigned was the Assign To, which was called Training, and Training shows up in the resource list. If I had assigned a sales rep or a designer or a project manager, they would show up in this list as well. I can also click Assign and add additional resources or even remove resources if I'd like to. When you're done, click Next. We'll move on to step 6 for our scope of work. Now, scope of work is interesting because here I can simply type into the box and add a plain text scope of work. I can also use what are called snippets, which are found in various aspects of System Integrator, where I can use pre-canned text that is stored in the system, and I can basically paste it into a screen and then edit it for my current purposes. Now, I want to note that you can't access it here, but inside of a project, when you go to the Scope of Work feature, you can switch to use Scope of Work in RTF format, where you can edit a Scope of Work document in either WordPad, Microsoft Word, or another editor. Click Next when you're done there, and we'll move on to step 7, where we can define locations for our project. Note that we can click either Add or New. Add lets us look at a list of existing locations saved as defaults within SI and pick from those. New lets us type in a new location of our own. I want to note that the location hierarchy is 5 levels deep. I can have things like the building, the floor, the room, and even some space within the room. My recommendation is keep it as simple as you can and only as complex as necessary for the job. When you're done there, click Next. We move to step 8, which is Systems. Just the same as Locations, I can click Add or New. And there is a hierarchy. We do have systems and subsystems, but it is only 2 levels deep. So you can have systems, and then systems can contain a level of subsystems, but there is not a 3rd level. We'll go ahead and click Next, move on to step 9. And we're looking at our contract payment. So we have this payment terms option where we can set all of the values. First, we can give payments names, and these show up in our contract reports. We can choose to use a fixed amount if we'd like. In some cases, we might use our initial deposit as a fixed dollar amount. Sometimes that's a requirement by law. So we can use a fixed amount. And then if we do that, all of our other payments, if they are percentage based like these, the total of 100% will be the remainder of the contract amount after you subtract that fixed amount from it. We can also apply billing dates if we'd like to. This is not a typical function, but in some cases, the specific dates of billing may be known. In that case, you can actually pick dates and place them here. And the billing amounts are shown as 0 because this project has no value. But once the project's created and I build my bill of materials with parts and labor, it will auto-calculate my payment. If I'd like to choose other payment terms, I can actually save them and I can choose them from my catalog structure and pick different types of contract payments for different project types. When we're done, click Next, and we are on the last step, step 10, which is where our project custom fields can be accessed. Now, this isn't for everyone, but if you do have some custom data that you'd like to access and to be able to store along with your project records, your project custom fields are going to be very useful for that, and this is one place you can go ahead and set those at the time that you create your project. And the last step, you're going to click Save, and the new project wizard will close, and then your project will actually get created, and it will open in the project editor.